Last time we have discussed introduction to tissues, body tissues, human body tissues, right? Today we will dive in tissues and we'll discuss a little bit detail of body tissues. Our body is organized under a specific organization, which is called cellular organization. And what is that? That our body is made up of 100 trillion cells. 100 trillion cells. These cells combines together and forms tissues. Tissues forms organs. Organs are making organ system, and different organ systems makes whole body or organism. For example, we have epithelial cells are epithelial cells. They may be nervous cells, or they may be connective cells, and maybe myocytes mean muscles cells. And these cells combine together and form the respected connective or epithelium or muscles tissues, right? So the tissues are also of four types. For example, epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscular tissues, and nervous tissues, right? These different tissues combines together mean an organ. There are different types of tissues, but in tissues there will be one type of cell. For example, if we have epithelial tissue, the cells in epithelial tissues must be epithelial cells. In connective tissues, the cells must be connective cells, right? But after tissues making organs, for example eye, for example hand, for example heart, these organs are made up of different types of tissues. Mean in one organ there will be epithelial, connective, muscular, nervous tissues collectively, right? And after making organs, these organs combines together and forms a specific system. For example, cardiovascular system. For example, musculoskeletal system. For example, digestive system, right? And after these systems, these whole systems combines together and form a whole body or organism. For example, here human body is composed of different types of systems: digestive system, nervous system, cardiovascular system. This is called the cellular organization. So our body forms under a specific organization called cellular organization. In cellular organization, we have discussed in detail the cells, right? The structure of cell, the cell organelle, cytoplasm, nuclear membrane, right? After cell, we will discuss now tissues, right? What is tissue? How we can define tissues? The tissues is the combination of cells. Combination of two or more than two cells which have a specific function. For example, connective tissues is performing the function of connection between other tissues. The muscular tissues forms muscles and used for contraction and relaxation movements, etc. Right? So the combination of two or more than two cells which have a specific function. For example, if I have generally, this is a cell, after combination it forms tissue. and in the branch of anatomy or the branch of medical sciences in which we study about the tissues is called histology. Histology, right? Now the human body is composed of four different types of tissues. The whole body is composed of four different types of tissues. The one is four types of tissues. One is epithelial tissues. The second is muscular tissues, nervous tissues, and connective tissues, right? These are the four types of cells and making the whole body. All the systems are composed of these four types of tissues, right? The epithelial tissue is further divided. Epithelial tissues, for example, it is divided into simple epithelium and stratified epithelium. Simple epithelium and stratified epithelium. We will discuss this in detail, but the muscular tissues are divided into three types of further types classified, right? Muscular tissues may be smooth muscles, they may be cardiac muscles, and they may be skeletal muscles, right? This is the classification of muscular tissues, right? Nervous tissues is also divided. For example, nervous tissues. Nervous tissues are further divided into three types. One is called sensory neurons. One is called motor neurons, and next is intermediate or accessory neuron, right? The connective tissues is also divided. For example, connective tissues may be hard connective tissues, like bones. There may be soft connective tissues, and they may be fluid type connective tissues like blood, right? So this is the classification of connective tissues. We will classify further these types, but this is simply the classification of tissues and the types of tissues in our body. This is epithelium, connective tissues, muscular tissues, and nervous tissues, right? Today we will focus on this epithelial tissues, right? After that, muscular tissues are already discussed, right? Neurons will be discussed in nervous system, right? And after epithelium we will discuss connective tissues, the anatomy and physiology of connective tissues. Today we will discuss the anatomy and physiology of epithelial tissues, right? What is epithelial tissue? The first type is epithelial tissues. All those tissues which are making the soft organs of body, right? Or we can define that all the tissues which are tightly packed with each other, the cells, right? They are called epithelial tissues. All the tissues which are providing the protection to body, external protection, which are used for secretions, are called epithelial tissues. So the characteristics of epithelial tissues are: first one, the cells of epithelial tissues will be highly packed cells, right? For example, these are the cells of epithelial tissues, and these cells are called epithelial cells. Epithelial cells combine together and forms epithelial tissue. The first characteristic is these all the cells are highly packed with each other. It means that there is no or very less extracellular component in between the epithelial cells. So the second characteristic is there is no or very less extracellular components in between cells and epithelial tissues. For example, I have these cells, right? You can see that there is very less extracellular component, and there is no extracellular component in between these cells, right? So in epithelial tissues there will be no or very less extracellular components in between the cells. This is the second characteristic. The third one, all the epithelial tissues, all the cells of epithelial tissues will be lying on basement membrane, right? So the third characteristic is cells of epithelial tissues will be lying on basement membrane. This basement membrane is a type of connective tissue, right? This is a type of connective tissue, but all the epithelial cells will be lying on basement membrane. For example, I have this epithelial tissue. This red one is basement membrane, right? On the basis of this basement membrane, we are dividing the domains of epithelial tissue. We will discuss in this lecture later, right? So this is the basement membrane. All the cells are lying on basement membrane. This is the next characteristic of these tissues, right? The next characteristic is we can classify epithelial tissues on the basis of cells present in epithelial tissues, right? We will see to the cells and will classify the epithelial tissues. For example, if we have the cells which are flat like this, we will call it squamous epithelium or squamous cells. If the cell shape is like this, square type, it was called cuboidal cells or cuboidal epithelial cells, right? If the cells are long like this and the nucleus will present in base, it will called columnar epithelium, columnar epithelial cell, right? And if the cell is columnar, if the cell have change shape, for example, like this, and the nucleus is present in center, it will called pseudo epithelium, pseudo epithelium, right? We will discuss the epithelial tissues on the basis of these cells, right? The next thing is we can classify epithelial tissues and epithelium are alternative words, right? So we can classify epithelium on the basis of layers of cells present in tissues, right? For example, if the epithelial tissues is composed of one layer lying on basement membrane, it will called simple epithelium, right? And if epithelial tissues have more than one layer, but there are some conditions for this classification, right? If it is composed of more than one layer and only one layer is lying on basement membrane, it will called stratified epithelium. Only the first layer is lying on basement membrane, it will called stratified epithelium, right? The next, in stratified epithelium, we will classify the tissues on the basis of only the outer layer of cells, right? The cells present on the outer layer of this tissue is the type of that epithelial tissue, right? We will discuss this in detail. So these are some characteristics of epithelial tissues, right? The next, what they are making these epithelial tissues, what they are making in body tissues are where it will be present abundantly, right? The first, epithelial tissues these tissues may be membranous tissues. These are maybe membranous. What are membranous? Membranous epithelium, it will make sheets in body, a long sheets, and if it making a small organ, it will called glandular epithelium. This is called membranous epithelium, and the next is glandular epithelium, right? Where the membranous epithelium will be present, there are some specific sites in body where membranous epithelium will be present, like for example, these membranous epithelium will present in body, first body cavities, internal body cavities. Internal body cavities mean that epithelium is present in, for example, pericardial cavity. The cavity around heart is called pericardial cavity. Epithelium is present in pericardial cavity. For example, I have a simple heart here, right? And there is a cavity present around this heart. This is called pericardial cavity. This red are, for example, these are epithelial cells, right? So this membranous epithelium surrounding the body cavities, one of that cavity is pericardial cavity. The next is pleural cavity. The cavity around lungs is called pleural cavity. For example, this is these are lungs, and the cavity around lungs is called pleural cavity, right? This cavity is also lined by membranous epithelium, right? This is the next location of epithelial tissues, right? The next is, for example, abdominal cavity is called peritoneal cavity. Peritoneal cavity is also lined by membranous epithelium, right? And so on. All the cavities are lined by epithelial tissues, right? The next thing is, it also covers the external body. External body surface, right? For example, epidermis is composed of epithelial tissues. Epidermis is one of the important layer of skin. Is composed of epithelial tissues, right? The next thing is the body tubes. Body tube system. There is a very large tube system in our body, right? For example, gastrointestinal tract. Gastrointestinal tract. This is a tube. For example, from mouth, it is starting from mouth. The stomach, for example, these are intestines, right? All the way from mouth up to intestines. These tubes are lined by epithelial tissue. Different types of epithelial tissues are present in this digestive system. So the body tube system is also composed of epithelial tissues. For example, the next is respiratory tract. Different types of epithelial tissues will be present here. For example, here the simple cuboidals are present, simple columnars are present. Here the pseudostratifieds are present and respiratory tract. But in respiratory tract also epithelial tissues are present. For example, this is trachea, bronchus and lungs. Even the alveoli are composed of epithelial tissues, epithelial cells. Respiratory tract is also composed of epithelial tissues. The next is, for example, urogenital system. Urogenital tract is also composed of epithelium. The kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, right? All are composed of epithelial tissues, right? The next one is all the blood vessels, body vessels. That is also a tube system. How many how long the blood vessels are in our body? Any one of you? नमगो बॉडी के total arteries or veins or that all चरायो के 10 distance cover kai. Is one tube. All the capillaries, all the arteries and all the veins are joining each other. It's mean that all the blood vessels is one tube, and this one tube is 100 mile long in adults. 100 miles, right? And all these capillaries, for example, blood vessels, veins, capillaries and arteries are composed of epithelium, right? And also the lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic vessels are also composed of epithelium, right? So these are the sites in which the epithelial tissues are present. Next, what function is performing by these epithelial tissues? What are the main specific functions which the epithelial tissues perform in body? So the next is function. Glandular epithelium. Glandular epithelium present in glands. Glands, right? This epithelium, if the cells making sheets like this diagram, this is called membranous epithelium, and if the epithelium is forming a special organs in body which are called glands and you specifically used for secretions, it will called glandular epithelium. And glandular epithelium is present in glands, different types of hormonal glands, endocrine glands, exocrine glands, right? Next is the functions of epithelial tissues, right? What is the function? I have already told you what is the function. The first one is protection. It protect our body because all the external covering of body is composed of epithelium, epidermis. So it protects us from external hurdles, external environment. If any type of toxicity or abnormalities occurs in external environment, our internal body is protected by this external covering, and external covering is composed of epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissues provide us protection from external hurdles. The next is absorption. Like for example, if I am eating carbohydrates, right, this the function of this digestive tract is to break down the food into small digestible particles, right? And after breakdown, this wall of stomach is composed of epithelial tissues. For example, this is epithelial lining, right? And this blood vessels is also composed of epithelium, right? This food particles will absorb from stomach or intestine into blood through this epithelium, right? So this epithelium have also performing the absorption function in body, right? Gaseous exchange is also the function of epithelial. So the next function is gaseous exchange, and the main site for gaseous exchange is lungs. For example, this is lung, and in lungs we have alveoli. This is alveoli. Alveoli is composed of epithelial tissues having two types of epithelium. We will discuss the type 1 pneumocytes and type 2 pneumocytes, right? For example, this is blood supply, blood, and when we breathe we inhale oxygen into our lungs, right? And this oxygen is exchanged with carbon dioxide in alveoli, and this function is performed by epithelium. So gaseous exchange is also the function of epithelial tissues, right? The next thing is secretions. Right? There is one very important protective layer called the mucous membrane. Mucous membrane is present on the digestive tract, also on respiratory tract. All these mucus is secreted by epithelial tissues present on the way, right? For example, I have this digestive system, and digestive system have epithelial tissues. Some specific type epithelium called the mucus secreting cells. Mucus secreting cells. This mucus secreting cells secretes a thick substance called mucus, and it lined the internal layer of stomach. Why? Because this red line, this is mucous membrane, and it protects this epithelium from acidity which is present in stomach, because the pH of stomach is 2, very acidic, and if these cells will expose direct to these acids, it will be ulceratic, right? So the mucous membrane protecting us from this acidic environment, and this mucus is secreting by epithelial cells or epithelial tissue. So this next thing is secretions. Also, for example, if I have different types of glands in body, for example, parotid or salivary glands. For example, I have adrenal glands, and the function of glands is secretion of hormones, right? So these glands are formed of epithelial tissues. So epithelial tissues are also responsible for secreting hormones, etc., right? The next is secretions in body. The next thing is sensations. These are receptors which receives the stimulus from outside of body. For example, one example is nose. For example, we are taking nose. In nose, for example, I have, this is nose, right? And in nose we have specific type of epithelial cells, and these epithelial cells secreting also mucus, and their mucus is responsible for detecting the smell, right? For example, if we are inhaling methane, right, the smell of this methane is detecting by these epithelium, right? And this epithelium, so this epithelium is responsible for sensation. The next is, for example, vestibulocochlear cells, which is present in organ of corti in internal ear, also responsible for hearing. Hearing is a sensation, right? So these are the functions, the main functions of epithelial tissues. After this, we will classify the epithelium into different types of tissues. For example, we will discuss the simple squamous epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, stratified cuboidal epithelium, stratified columnar epithelium, simple ciliated epithelium, stratified ciliated epithelium, keratinized epithelium and non-keratinized epithelium, transitional epithelium and pseudo stratified epithelium, right? We will divide these all epithelial tissues, and also will try to discuss the locations of that different types of tissues in body, that what type of epithelium is making what type of organ, right? Any question up to here? We tool epithelium. زیات کم چې secretions کې ټول epithelium ځکه د heart tissues نه